Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunnavari Paschatya Desatarine Namaste. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki, Jam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Pravijacharya, Astoro Shishimata's Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki, Jam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Pravijacharya, Astoro Shishimata's Divine Grace, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada ki, Anantikoti Vaishnavrinda ki, Nam Acharya Srilas Thakur ki, Prem se kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki, Sisi Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath, Shyam Kun Radha Kun, Giri Govardhan ki, Vrindavan Navadip Dham ki, Gangamai Jamunamai ki, Bhakti Devi Tulasi Devi ki, Samaveta Bhakta Vrind ki, Nitai Gaur Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotee. All glories to the assembled devotee. All glories to the assembled devotee. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Namo. Hare Krishna to everybody. So this morning we will be reading from, I'll be paraphrasing and speaking from Hari Suri Prabhu's diary, Transcendental Diary. Today we are doing Mayapur. We're continuing actually from last week, Mayapur, February 24th, 1976. So it was very cold in Mayapur at that time, and Prabhupada didn't talk much in the morning on his walk. He normally did his walk, but there was some interesting information was that Gopal Krishna Maharaj was trying to connect with people in Eastern Europe, especially in the Soviet Union. And he told Prabhupada, he had heard that Harikesh Swami is also trying to go to Hungary. But Gopal Krishna Maharaj didn't know very much. But Prabhupada, I would say, seemingly was pleased that his disciples were going to different areas to preach Krishna consciousness, especially in parts of the world, different parts of the world like Eastern Europe, and more especially in the Soviet Union. At that time, it's called the Iron Curtain. You could not go into Russia or go to the other parts of these communistic countries to preach Krishna consciousness. And quite challenging. And at once I recall that there was one devotee, Mula Prakriti or something like that, her name was, one of Prabhupada's disciple. She was distributing books in the airport, mainly in the airport. And she told Prabhupada questioned her, and he kind of questioned her more, who's buying the books and where they're going. And she was explaining how like diplomats were buying the book and they were putting in their cases, because normally the diplomats' bags are not checked at the airport, in most cases at that time. So they go with the books to the other parts of the world, especially like Soviet Union or Russia. And Prabhupada would say, we cannot go, but Lord Chaitanya can go, the books are going. So the books are important. So Prabhupada gave a very short class that day, and he continued on his theme that we were speaking last week on Prahlad Maharaj. And he's describing how the material world is a place of suffering. And how the soul is trying to enjoy this material world and this illusory energy. And then he spoke about, a little bit about Maya, and which has two potencies, Atmika Shakti and Avarnatmika Shakti. Or there's two potencies, the throwing and the covering potencies. And was explaining how the living entity doesn't want to get out of this material world. And just like Maya would say sometimes, when people take to Krishna consciousness, and Maya will try to deviate that person from Krishna consciousness. And we find that happening in our society. Sometimes people come and they stay for a while and then they leave. And Prabhupada made an important point. He said that unless one is very sincere, he cannot stay with us. He will be thrown away. He will be covered and thrown away. So one has to be sincere, and that requires a lot from us also. That we must be very determined to execute Krishna consciousness. And sincerity means following all the rules and regulations, no matter how big or small. So Prabhupada spoke, the class was very short. Yeah. And the other point is even any species, even if it's the lowest species, maybe absorbed in just eating like pigs or hogs, they just absorbed in eating stool. But they find great satisfaction from that. But if you give them like some sweet preparation or something, they will refuse it. So we can well imagine what the material world is like. There's so many things to say. When your knowledge is stolen by illusion also, that is considered that one is covered by Maya. And Prabhupada was quoting that verse from the 7th chapter, text 15, Maya Pritagyana. So then Prabhupada goes on to speak with another devotee called Dayananda, and he wanted to know what the latest reviews of his books, and he wanted them to be published in the section of BTG, in a new section of BTG, and also in a newspaper in Hyderabad called the Hare Krishna Explosion. And he was concerned about his library part. He wanted his books to be distributed so that people will get knowledge about Krishna and surrender to Krishna. So that was just a small exchange between him and Dayananda Prabhu. Then February 25th, 1976 was a Ekadasi, and many devotees were arriving for the festival. So like recently we observed Ekadasi also. Some of us just fasted through, and it was very nice and inspiring. But at least from my reading, I haven't read, maybe I haven't read so far, that Prabhupada observed Nirujal, and he was, at least somebody raised the question to him, about Bhima Ekadasi, and he said whether it's Bhima or Arjuna Ekadasi, doesn't matter. We take a little fruit, we preach. So preaching is more important. Although we read in the scriptures, in different parts of the scriptures, in Chaitanya Charitamrita, about how Lord Chaitanya is encouraging his mother to follow Ekadasi and not to eat grains. And in the Bhakti Sandarbha, Jiva Goswami, there's a quotation from Skanda Purana admonishing that a person who eats grains on Ekadasi becomes a murderer of his mother, father, brother and spiritual master, and that even if he is elevated to Vaikuntha planet, he falls down. So we observe Ekadasi, but our main goal is to preach. So we may take some grains and, not grains, take some fruits, non-grains, and preach Krishna consciousness, which is more important. Sometimes you may observe a fast, but you may not do anything else. and especially if in an institution you have to do the needful at times. So it's important for us to observe it as best as we can. If we can manage it and do the extra service, that's okay. But if you can't, you rather eat and do the service. That's important for us, at least. But the real purpose of Ekadasi is minimizing the demands of the body, but mainly hearing and chanting. Mainly hearing and chanting, according to Nectar of Devotion. So then, after that, Prabhupada goes out for his walk, and he called one devotee named Sudama Vipra Swami into his room. And Sudama Vipra was a very loud, the way Hariswari Prabhu writes it, is a loud and capricious fellow. Has a questionable reputation among devotees and among the devotees. So capricious means like changes of mood and behavior. And Prabhupada was aware of this, but Sudama Vipra, he had faith in Srila Prabhupada. So Prabhupada, didn't really scold him or didn't directly scold him or chastise him. But he merely hinted about his shaky position while encouraging him to do better. And then Prabhupada was sitting at his desk and applying his tilak, and he told Sudama Vipra, don't become like a big monkey. In the beginning you were so enthusiastic for sannyas, now you must do something. And Sudama Vipra promised that he would try. He would try. Now just taking sannyas, it's quite a change. You have to, the way Prabhupada recommend you follow it, from the whole varnashram system, and you can move from brahmachari to sannyas. But the fourth stage is a very painstaking situation, as described in the Bhagavad Gita in chapter 2. Prabhupada writes in his purport. But if one is serious about making life perfect, then you should take the order of sannyas, and in spite of all the difficulties. And what is that difficulty? Is to sever family relationships, to give up the connection of wife and children. And that's not easy either, in the sense that, not that we don't, we become, we don't have emotions. Yes, but we kind of detach. Like Kunti was also praying that, sever that knot, that tie of affection. And the Pandavas were devotees, so there was an aspect of the material side also. So it's like that, so we have to sever that. And in another purport, in the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada also writes that without purification of heart, sannyas is simply a disturbance to the social order. So then Prabhupada walked into his room, and he joined other senior devotees. And as they climbed the stairs and came onto the roof, Srila Prabhupada continued speaking about the qualification for a sannyasi. And then he said that if one has any thought that a woman is beautiful, that material wealth and comfort are desirable, or if he has any desire for material life, he cannot take sannyas. So those are the requirements. How that sounds? You know, Krishna makes it so, like household life is not an easy life. I've been in a household life, so I know what it is. But I had a very short stay in household life, not too long. And it's difficult, right? Bhatta Prabhu? Very difficult. You have to I don't want to talk about it, you'll fight with me. So just I'll leave it out. Yeah, it's quite difficult. And if someone just takes sannyas, just to beg for his belly, then he's only cheating himself, And you also get that, people may think, well, take sannyas, cheating. And some while back I was reading when Prabhupada was in a room conversation in London, and he was talking about cheating. Just like if you cheat somebody else, they may catch you, or they may not worry about it too much, even if they know about it. But if you cheat yourself, nobody can catch you. If you cheat yourself, then nobody can catch you. And also, if one accepts sannyas at an immature state, there's definitely a possibility, as Srila Prabhupada writes in the 7th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, that one will be attracted to women, lusty desires. And he says it's like, and when the person falls down, it's like eating his own vomit. He vomits and then he eats it. So that's how it's described. So yeah. But then, even if one is not suitable, one may enter, the Grihastha ashram. But when he enters the Grihastha ashram, he should fight with Maya with great strength. He should fight. But we say, Maya is very strong, but we should fight with Maya with great strength. But we should not give up fighting and go away. He writes that in the 8th canto in a purport. I was reading it last night. Gajendra, yeah. And one should be very ashamed remaining in household life and not promoting oneself to the higher stages, namely vanaprastha and sannyas. So one should, yeah. So anyway, Prabhupada, many people were worrying him to take sannyas. And he was saying, I don't know why our disciples are so anxious to take sannyas. Everyone comes with this idea, hey, give me sannyas. And yeah. But Prabhupada was unhappy because there were so many requests and they were not strictly following. And then Jayapataka Maharaj Swami at that time replied that a brahmachari who gets tired of taking instructions asks for sannyas so he can be independent. So he can be independent. And then Prabhupada said that is not good. And he said that sannyasis is designed for rendering service to everyone. And it's not that I'm a sannyasi and you are my servants. That mentality we should not have. But rather we are serving. The sannyasi is serving us. But we want to serve. And then Jayapataka Swami, he raises the question, if one must be fixed up to take sannyas, or does one take sannyas to become fixed up? So, like that. But then Prabhupada, he replied that the 4 ashrams are meant to fix one up gradually, so that ultimately you become free from material desires, and then become a sannyasi. Then the conversation turned to another devotee called called Sharma Das, an American devotee. And he was serving in Africa. Shri Raghunath ki. So he was disturbed of the behavior and the poor standards, so he came to Vrindavan to see Prabhupada, and he only wanted to chant Hare Krishna. So Prabhupada allowed him to come here to Mayapur, so he went to Mayapur. Subsequently into Mayapur. And he was living in the Goshala and he was chanting 150 rounds a day. And eating remnants of the foodstuffs left by the devotees. So 150 rounds a day, that's a lot. I think Haridas were 194 rounds or something like that if you calculate it. It's about 194 rounds. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj also chanted one time, I think 194 rounds. I read it in one of his books. And somebody asked him, like whether they were kind of find out whether how his level of hearing was, like whether it's good rounds. He said, but 16 rounds were good. 194. 16 rounds were good. So he came to just chant, and he came to get permission to build a tree hut so he could live in it, so that he could avoid seeing anyone. Because he was being complained that he was getting disturbed when he was chanting. Now people are talking to him, he's getting disturbed. So that was his reasoning. But Prabhupada, he condemned such an idea. He said no. And he said, you're living, monkeys live in the tree. And monkeys are very renounced. They're very renounced. They live on trees, they jump from one branch to another, and they have dozens of girlfriends. Dozens of girlfriends. So that's what living like a monkey means. And then he said that this devotee's, so-called renunciation is another form of sense gratification. Another form of sense gratification. It was just based on his self-interest. And then Prabhupada gave the example of two thieves. One who stole a diamond and the other stole a cucumber. It's just like you say in Hindi, you say for diamond you'll say hira, and for cucumber you say kira. So whether you're a hira chor or a kira chor, you're still a chor. Either way, you're still a thief. And then Prabhupada said, simply because one steals in a small way, it does not mean that he's not a thief. And then Jayapataka Maharaj asked if Grihastha life was meant for one who steals cucumbers. And Prabhupada laughed. He said, yes, Krishna is giving allowance for stealing cucumber. But then Prabhupada was, he didn't discourage the devotee, Sharma Das, but he wasn't doing anything bad. But he said that active service is better. There must be some activity. What is that definition of pure devotional service? Sunyam, jnana karma navritam, anukulyena Krishna anushilana. Anushilana means there must be some activity, there must be some active engagement. There's at least 3 requirements. You must do it for Krishna. Must be continuous. There must be active engagement, and Krishna must be pleased. It must be anukulyena, favorable. So active engagement. And therefore, even little things you do, even just take the lamp around, from in the morning. It's all these service. This little thing, we should be running to do these things, We should be actually fighting to go and grab the lamp to take around. Like in India, it's everybody's running to the lamp. But in South Africa, even you go with a lamp, the person is looking up sometimes. But but in India, you just leave the lamp in the corner, you'll see the whole crowd going there. Then you'll get space to see the deities. That's the time you get darshan. But thing is, it's nice that they have that type of enthusiasm. Yeah. Then. Then Prabhupada was not displeased with him. He said that something is better than nothing. Because he was afraid that if he leaves, he may leave the practice of Krishna consciousness and go away. It's like how would you say? A blind uncle is better than no uncle. It's something like that. But actually, you must know that the uncle is blind. That you have to know. Yeah. So then, there was another person who also wanted to take sannyas. I don't know, somehow this topic of sannyas is coming up. So another devotee, Mahavir, he was not mature enough to take sannyas, and he wanted to take, but there was some objections from the devotee. And Mahavir is, another name for Mahavir is Hanuman. So Prabhupada asked him, do you still want to take sannyas? But don't be like a big monkey. Then, yeah. So, sannyas means, one must be successful. But Prabhupada dealt with differently even when people fell down. If somebody falls down, what do you expect them to do? Is to get up and walk, right? So Prabhupada was very liberal. And there was a devotee, I don't know if it's probably not the same person, Hanuman. He was a disciple, he was initiated by Prabhupada, and he brought up the topic that with Prabhupada, that you remember Chota Haridas, he was rejected by Lord Chaitanya because he became too much lusty after women. And then he's saying that I was also one of your disciples, and I also became lusty after women, and I was wondering if you'll also reject me from your association. So there was a heavy silence as everybody looked at Prabhupada, and after a long pause he said, Lord Chaitanya is God. He can spread the movement all over the world in 1 second without the help of anyone if he likes. I am not God. I am simply a servant of God. I require so much assistance to help me to spread Krishna consciousness all over the world. If someone renders even some small service to help me, I am eternally indebted to him. You have rendered so much assistance, how could I reject you? So he's very, he was very compassionate. This was in the Prabhupada Lilamrita, it's mentioned. And I found this very, very nice that, and when devotees did fall down, or Prabhupada encouraged them, quite a few of them, he encouraged them. Then as Prabhupada was entering the temple room for the morning program, he saw some light canework construction in the side of the road. So he was asking what it was, and then Sudama Vipra explained he was building a hut from a split bamboo. because he wanted to, rent, live on that land and pay like $2,000 a year. He wanted to stay in Mayapur, but he wanted to be a little away from the main body of devotees. He didn't want to be disturbed. And last night I was reading, in the 4th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and this I heard from Bhakti Chaitanya Maharaj, must be like 25 years ago. And I wrote it down in my book when he was doing the demons in Vrindavan. There was only like 3 students were there, 3 or 4 of us. It says, anyone who is trying to be aloof from this Krishna consciousness society and yet engage in Krishna consciousness is living in a great hallucination. For this is not possible. From this statement by Dhruva Maharaj, it is clear that unless one is associated with devotees, his devotional service does not mature. It does not become distinct from material activities. So you can't just go in a secluded place and imitate Haridas Thakur, we shouldn't do that. But Prabhupada didn't comment too much, and he was pleased with Sudama Vipra because he was in the holy place. So then the next day, in February 26, 1976, Jayapataka Maharaj was telling Prabhupada that to make devotees in Bengal was a little easier than any other place in India. And Prabhupada, he was also Bengali. And Prabhupada was saying that the Bengali culture is adored all over the world, all over India, at least. And he said, the Guru of Mahatma Gandhi had even said, whatever Bengal does today, other provinces will think tomorrow. So, and he was talking, and there's many leading, people in history that were Bengalis, like Banerjee, Surendranath Banerjee, Vivekananda, Ravindranath Tagore, Aurobindo Ghosh, so many different people. And but then Prabhupada said an interesting thing. He said, Aurobindo was born in England, but later he turned against the British. At one time, Aurobindo seriously practiced yoga. However, later he had some connection with a French woman and became quite fat. Prabhupada said that meant that from a yogi, he became a bogi, or a sense enjoyer. He said that the next stage is rogi. Rogi means diseased. So yogi, bogi, and rogi, he became diseased. Yeah. And there was an interesting thing about British, that I was reading. Srila Prabhupada made some statement about British people. He said that the whole British Empire was built by thievery. They came to India, they took Indian soldiers and conquered other parts of the world. And Prabhupada said that as soon as India became independent, then the whole British Empire started to collapse. And he gave the reason was because of all the atrocities the British did in India. And he said they will become beggars. It's interesting because they are having problems also with, over some years now it's been a little shaky. And then he said, have you seen the camels in India? How they hold their heads high with their noses in the air. And he said the British Rajas, the British kings, took their next birth as camels in India. Yeah, it was quite amusing. Yeah, because if you see the camels, yeah, how they are in India. Anyway, so then then Prabhupada goes on quoting teachings of Prahlad Maharaj. Again, he's in his class, in the Srimad Bhagavatam class, and he was talking about that how one cannot protect himself. Even the best physician cannot protect a patient. It's not dependent on him. So Prabhupada was speaking on the subject matter, and he was talking about the human form of life, how dangerous it is in this material world, how people are killed. And he said, the human life means if somebody is being killed, so he should be immediately take warning. Oh, my turn is coming, let me go away. So we should always think that when we hear about death, it's it's going to happen to me shortly. So I should perfect myself in Krishna consciousness and go back to Godhead. And then he told a story in this connection of a hunter who spread his net. Then some little birds fell in the net and they were crying. Then the mother and father had come. And then the mother dove into and got caught in the net, was captured. And then the father was thinking, if I go to save them, I'll also be captured. So he said, let me go away and take sannyas. So he went away. Because he didn't want to be captured. So this material world is very enamoring, and one can be captured and killed. And we all are captured in the network of Maya. So then it changed into another subject matter of another lady. Her name was Yoga Shakti Ma. And she came with long hair streaming with saffron cloth and with 3 male followers. And she wanted to invite Prabhupada for a world peace conference. And they told Prabhupada that they were from Calcutta, and they gave their address where they were from Calcutta. Of course, she was like an intelligent lady, knowing that Prabhupada and his followers were very prominent and popular. She wanted to be the center of it, like as the organizer, steal some credit. And then she had a leaflet, and the leaflet said, it proclaimed health, harmony, happiness through jnana, dhyana, bhakti, karma, and so on. In other words, it was a hodgepodge of ideas with no real focus. She finished by saying that their goal was to serve God and humanity. And then Prabhupada, he just don't let people get off the hook so easily. So when he heard that about serving God, then Prabhupada asked her, who is God? And she could not answer. And he called it a bluff. And then one of them mumbled, Hari Om. Not Hari Om, but Hari Om, O-M. Another said something like, create and love us all. Because they were like trying this material, to make this material world a peaceful place, a happy place. And then Prabhupada spoke about that. I think Bhatta mentioned this sometime. If there's a toilet and you throw some scent, does that make it a nice place? So the material world is like that, It's still, yeah. So he speaks about suffering in this material world, and they felt uncomfortable, and they were speechless, and one man began to shake, and Then one of them left and all of them followed and they left. So Prabhupada was very expert in dealing with these type of, Mayavadis. And he just spoke the truth, and he was smiling. He was smiling, and then he said, he said, by their yoga shakti told me they have one flat in Calcutta. We have no such shakti, and we have 100 centers like this. So Prabhupada was very direct. Even there was another pastime in Kobe, I think it was in Japan. And there was a Mayavadi, Mahesh. And he wanted to offer some accommodation, some property to ISKCON. But anyway, he was a Mayavadi, and then there was a program arranged, and Prabhupada was, it's a long story, but Prabhupada was meant to speak. And there was another Swami, they brought a Mayavad Swami. They had another Swami, I forget his name now, it just slipped my mind. But Kaivalya Swami, Kaivalya Swami. Both of them were there. And there was one Asa, Vyasa-san. And they decided who's going to speak first. And then they said Prabhupada should speak because he's a senior man. So he sat on the Vyasa-san and was speaking. And he dove into, the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, about the individuality of the soul and various points he was making. And then he stopped. Then it was the other person's time to speak. So he had to sit near Vyasa, and Prabhupada is sitting there, he's not getting up. And he didn't get up. And then they put another chair, and the Swami was speaking, and he was speaking okay for a while, and then all of a sudden he got into some hodgepodge thing, and Prabhupada said, stop, stop, tell him to stop. And he summoned the devotees to lead kirtan. So while he's talking, he was going on, the kirtan started. So but he didn't, he was very bold, and he could do that, yeah. So yes, so then we were talking about the devotee Mahavira Prabhu. He had second thoughts on taking sannyas and staying in Mayapur. And he came to see Prabhupada, and he said he wanted to go to Brazil. The way Harisuri Prabhu writes it, I'll just read it. He obviously felt a little awkward or perhaps embarrassed that he now wants to leave Mayapur after having caused so much agitation as a manager. Timidly he approached Prabhupada and began, Prabhupada, I know that it is the duty of the disciple to satisfy the desire of the spiritual master. Prabhupada immediately enjoined, yes, and this is my desire, that you help manage Mayapur. Mahavir's discontent with his new assignment troubled his mind enough that he continued, but Srila Prabhupada, I think they need me in Brazil. I want to satisfy your desire, but I think I am better suited to Brazil. Prabhupada still indicated that he wanted him here in Mayapur, but finally seeing Mahavir's anxiety, he kindly consented to his return to South America. All right, whether a gopi or a cow, both are serving Krishna. Go to Brazil, you may serve there. Yeah. So then it concludes by, there's some I have to skip. I think we have a few minutes, 5 minutes. We can take some questions, or somebody could make some comments, or they'd like to add anything. Yeah. Anybody like to add anything? Okay. Srila Prabhupada, Madhuri, she likes to add something, or?
Hare Krishna. I just wanted to ask if you could elaborate more on something that you said. I think it was you were reading from Prabhupada. Actually, I don't know if it was something that you were saying or it was something in the book that you read. But anyway, you were talking about how, Kunti was praying to sever the knot of attachments.
Yeah.
Even though the Pandavas, they were, devotees, but there's still that material element. Can you elaborate on that?
Oh, yeah. Just like, in material life even, like if you're a parent, and when one is a parent, they love other people's children, but they love their children more. Isn't it? It's normal. They love their children more. But from a spiritual perspective, it's like when somebody advances spiritually, he not only loves his children, but he loves everybody. So it's not like there is some bodily relation because the person, took birth from my womb. There's some attachment. It's like that. So there's the Pandavas were devotees, but she's praying to cut off that attachment, and praying to Krishna, because it takes a while before we get freed from all our attachments. Even in Madhurya Kadambini, when you go through all that different stages, even you can be, even when you reach the level of Nishtha, like steadiness, but still, you can deviate. You can be carried away. And you can still deviate, but there's still some level of attachment. And even if you go to bhava, even ruchi, when one has a little taste also, still there is some contamination. And then if you go further up, to Ashakti and bhava, even at bhava the person can still fall down. So when one has children, then there is that level of that those material attachments come up, and even like Prabhupada, he lamented sometimes. He told his son once, I remember, that your mother was a good person. It was me who was bad, and he was genuinely crying. But he was not seeing that person from the perspective of wife, but as more as a devotee, And Prabhupada said, and Tamal Krishna who wrote that, I think he wrote that. He said, and Prabhupada genuinely meant it, that. But a pure devotee sees that, But a pure devotee, to become a pure devotee in the category of Prabhupada, it's possible, but it's quite a lot of work to do. It's not, yeah. So even he's, sometimes they were in difficulties, and he made arrangements that they get some monies, and then. But it was for a period of time that when he leaves, and then after that they, you don't have to give them anything. So that was Prabhupada, But as you move along, you'd find that we also amongst ourselves we have that attachments also. We'll be clinging on to something. Isn't it? We're clinging on to something and we don't want to share that with anybody. But gradually those attachments will go. But you have to pray to Krishna, like how Queen Kunti was praying, that maybe, yeah. Like I remember, even my own life, I was thinking, there's Krishna consciousness here, I have to do this thing because it's so important. But I have family, I have a wife, I have a daughter, and those attachments, and how I'm gonna cut these attachments. But then, my wife just died at a very young age. She was out of the way. So my daughter later remarked, when she grew up, she said that if your mother was alive, if her mother was alive, you won't be able to do so much for Krishna. And she told me that twice. And now at, like not very long ago. So she had this realization that yes, that the person was on the way. So we'll stop there. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. It's 8:30. 1 minute more I took. Sorry. Hare Krishna.